I was about 12. Me and my mom had gone to town 45 minutes out to do some shopping with her friends. I had a corn snake at the time, so I asked her if I could walk around the pet store one door down from the mini supermarket that she was shopping in to compare the prices of frozen mice with her local seller. She said sure, just come back as soon as I was done. The pet store had been there as long as I can remember. It had a very warehouse feel about it and was poorly lit by dim fluorescent lights too far above the floor. Before checking out the mice, I wanted to check the rest of the store, being the curious 12-year-old I was. As I was roaming around the aisles, I noticed you. You were in every single aisle I strolled down. Bald, middle-aged, a bit tubby, wearing dark blue plumber overalls over a white shirt. It was summer, and it was hot. I remember wondering why on earth you would come into a non-air-conditioned store in that. You carried a basket, but there was nothing in it. As you slowly stalked me down the aisle, I noticed the basket wasn't getting any more full. I started walking faster, taking random turns down different aisles to see if I was just being paranoid, but you were always 10 to 15 feet behind me. At some point, I finally thought I lost you. I power walked out of the pet store, and as soon as I cleared the doors, I sprinted down the street to the mini supermarket my mom was in. She hadn't even made it down the second aisle completely. I caught up to her. I immediately stripped off my bright pink hoodie and slung it in the cart, as well as ripping the hair tie out of my hair. I was smart for doing that, because when I looked back at the door, you were standing there, still carrying the basket from the pet store, and scanning the store for any sight of a 12-year-old girl in the bright pink hoodie and ponytail. When we left, I saw you in your van as you drove away, a plain white van, like something out of a true crime documentary or horror film. I think about you sometimes, and how if you caught me before I made it to the supermarket on that quiet Wednesday afternoon, what horrors could have been waiting for me in the back of the van. Guy in overalls who followed me out of the pet store without even putting down his basket. Even after 10 years, let's not ever meet again. Trigger warning for this story. Well, I recently found this subreddit and decided I would share a story with you all. This happened back in 2019 through 2021, and it still sticks with me today. I'll be using fake names for myself and the man that I'm talking about. Mary for me, and Dennis for him. When I was 13, I met someone on Discord. He was funny, smart, and exactly my type. He was 16, and we became close friends. After 3 months of getting to know him, I told him I had feelings for him. We ended up dating. We lived across the country from each other, and we're basically just friends, but whatever. So, as we are dating, he starts basically grooming me. As a kid who was always on the internet and exposed to Kik also, I was used to this behavior, and thought it was fine. He had me send nude photos, gross messages, and pretty much worship him. I wasn't allowed to talk to other people on Discord without him there, and stuff like that. He told me that he would kill himself if I ever left, or how he was always on drugs because he was so sad. He was also incredibly racist, and thought Nazi jokes were okay. I'm so mad at myself for not realizing that this wasn't okay back then. He ends up cheating on me with his ex and tossed me out the door. Didn't talk to me anymore and said that we shouldn't talk anymore because we weren't together. Here's where it gets bad. Note, this happened over 5 years ago, and I have a spotty memory of this time. New accounts pop up in the server we met on and start saying horrible things about me. Mary is a fat whale. Mary is an N-word, and more things of the sort. The account have names like Jerry Touches Kids, or Big Fat Whale, etc. I had gotten in trouble with the server owners because it was my fault that people were saying bad things, as if I told them to spam things about me or something. The accounts also started to message me, telling me to kill myself, die, how I'm a whale, a whore, and more. I ended up blocking every single account and moving on with my life. Great, it was over with. Or so I thought it was. Fast forward a year to late summer 2019. Everything starts up again. The messages, him telling people lies and rumors, and direct threats. I was sent unsolicited porn, death threats, slurs, and that I should kill myself because no one would care. At this point in time, I had undiagnosed depression and anxiety. Almost did kill myself. I went to therapy and tried to get over it. In 2020, right before quarantine happened, I got a boyfriend. I was very happy and came back out of my shell. He and I would play games on Discord together, and I joined more servers. Around 2 months later, I got another message. Someone had messaged me named Lily. It was a normal profile, and we were in a server together, so I thought nothing of it. She then had messaged me how I was, and I had never talked to her before, so I was confused. She said we had a long conversation about mental health the day before, so she wanted to make sure I was alright. I asked her who she was and what she was talking about, and she said something like, "Oh, you told me about this. You said you take medicine for schizophrenia, and you must have missed a dose. Are you off your meds?" I was extremely confused and scared because I had never talked to this person, and certainly did not have schizophrenia. After about 10 minutes of this charade, I realized it was Dennis. I blocked the account and didn't accept new friend requests. The next day, I got hundreds of messages with the same contents I previously mentioned, the threats, porn, etc. I was terrified. I asked my boyfriend for help. He told me to make a new account and not friend any of the other mutual friends so he wouldn't be able to find me. I did, which cost an affiliated Twitch account that I spent years building. I changed all my accounts, deleted most, and made new ones. The messages found me again. I have no idea how. These new accounts weren't even tied to me. I got fed up and had asked a mutual friend I thought I could trust some personal information about Dennis to go to the police and get a possible restraining order or something. I didn't totally know how the police handled these issues. Months go by and nothing, until fall of 2021, in which Dennis messages me, calling me a stupid bitch and how he'll always find me, how I'm so fat and dumb and no one loves me. I isolated myself and deleted more accounts. I was never able to go to the police about this because I had no information like full name or address. It's been 2 years and every day I worry if he lives near me, if he knows where I live or go to school. I recently found out that he has a website and made YouTube videos. He has made YouTube videos referencing me in 2022. His copyright claim is something like "Mary is a Fat Whale, Inc." I can't find it anymore. It was hell, and I'm still worried every day that he'll find me. I believe he has a Reddit account and could find this. I hope we don't ever meet again, Dennis. I wish you the worst. During summer 2022, my brother, 22, began dating his girlfriend, 23, and bringing her around my parents' house where I lived at the time. We'll call her Faye. She would attend holiday dinners, birthdays, things like that. Every time Faye came over, she started to look a little bit more like me, started wearing similar clothes and hairstyles, which previously we had completely different styles and aesthetics. My parents and I noticed it and made a few jokes about it between the three of us, but we didn't think too much of it. Maybe she just thought my style was cool, right? At the time I had platinum hair with the colors pink, blue, and purple in it. Faye began asking me for tips on how to dye her hair like mine, since I do mine at home. I thought it was innocent, so I gave her some instructions and told her what product I used. So the next time I saw Faye, her hair was identical to mine, and I couldn't be annoyed about it because, I gave her the advice. I have a necklace that I have worn every single day since I was 15. It's a choker with my name on it. Faye got the same exact necklace, but with her name on it. That was once again a little strange to me, but like everything else, I just brushed it off. But when she got fake blue contacts to match my eyes, that's when I seriously became unsettled by her. I did not have a friendship with her, so this was very weird behavior to me. She actually had me blocked on all social medias, which once again, I never understood. I did not know this person, nor why she would resent me for being her partner's sister. I wasn't even close with him. I actually avoided my brother unless he was at my parents' house, so her attitude towards me was just unexplainable. Even my parents were becoming weirded out by her actions. To this day, we still don't have an answer to why she was doing all this. In April 2023, my brother breaks up with Faye and kicks her out of their apartment. I don't know the details on why this happened. All I know about that situation is it's always been toxic between the two of them. Constant fighting and battling substance abuse. They were just messy from the start. 2 days after getting kicked out, Faye starts telling my brother that she's pregnant with his child. Both my brother and Faye are so young, and both have a history with substance abuse, benzos, and my brother was still actively using them at the time, so the pregnancy news horrified my family. We knew we wouldn't be stable enough to raise a child, so immediately we knew this was going to be something we would all end up pitching in to help with. At the time, my brother had a DUI, no car, in between jobs, and in and out of a mental hospital. Clearly, bringing a kid into this world was really going to cause turmoil for our family. My parents had purchased Plan B for the two of them more times than I can count, so at the end of the day, they were being irresponsible. So, Faye's pregnant with my brother's kid and is acting super strange towards me. I thought all of this was weird, but overall, I just felt horrible for the baby that was going to be brought into it. But like I said, up until this point, I wasn't overly concerned. This was all just petty drama. One night, I confided in a close friend and tell her what's going on with my brother and that I was going to become an aunt soon. My friend asked to see pictures of Faye, so we pulled up her Facebook profile. That's when I found out everything that she had been doing. Faye stole several items from my room, including clothes, blankets, sunglasses, perfumes, probably other stuff that I haven't even noticed yet. She had copied every single Spotify playlist that I made with the same titles, same songs, in the same order. She had the exact same room setup as me, with the same exact posters and tapestries, and even paintings that my grandmother painted. Faye actually painted identical ones. How much time did she have on her hands to do all of this shit? At this point, I was scared of her. She had copied everything about me to a T. My hair, my eyes, my outfits, my room, music. What the fuck? I'm a nail artist. She even started copying the exact sets of nails I was doing. I can't even imagine how much time she spent trying to be like me. It's fucking horrifying to think about. Now backtracking to July 2023. The place I worked received an email containing a few TikTok videos of me on Molly, acid, from back when I was in an active addiction, freshly 18, and posting recklessly on a viral account. I've been sober for 2 years now. In that email, the person was essentially trying to get me fired from my job for having a history of substance abuse. I was heartbroken. My boss had no idea about my history with substances, so not only was that embarrassing, but I feared losing my job. I couldn't imagine who would have sent this email. I don't have enemies or people out to get me, and I had no idea where to even begin as far as figuring out who was trying to sabotage me. Months later, I knew it was Faye. There was nobody else it could have been. Along with the email to my work, I received a text message from an unknown, untraceable phone number. It basically said, "I emailed some pretty damning videos of you to your work. If you get fired, I'm sure your parents will take care of you." Which leads me to believe that her motive behind all of this is to tear my family apart, cause problems between my parents and I, so that she could weasel her way in or something. I really just don't know. What else could she be trying to gain from doing all this? So that's the beef of it, basically. I just want to know if there's anything I can do other than staying silent on social medias. Faye is able to view my accounts through fake accounts that she has created. I'm honestly convinced sometimes that she put a camera in my room or tapped my phone. This whole thing has made me extremely paranoid. I have proof of everything she's copied, stolen from me. I just don't know if there's anything I could do with it. I was wondering if anyone had any ideas other than moving several states away and changing my entire identity to escape this person. So recently, I've had a few encounters with a delivery guy. First one, he asked me, "Are you Amy Duncan from 323 Citrus Avenue? You moved, huh?" All while smiling creepy. I thought he was just a delivery guy trying to do small talk, so I brushed him off. I am living alone, so I thought I was just overthinking by getting creeped out. Then I realized, after I thought about it, he was my neighbor from my previous address. He struck up a conversation with me saying he knows one of my friends. I don't like talking to strangers, so I didn't talk to him for long. But it stayed with me because I felt uncomfortable with him. I felt like he was dangerous. After that, I was going out and saw him again delivering to my neighbor. I ignored him, trying to walk by. He saw me and recognized me, even though I was wearing a mask, and asked the same questions again. After that, since I don't go out much, I didn't see him that often. There was this one time, he was just standing in front of my neighbor's house, but I just walked by. Then I saw him in my Facebook friend request, and I just ignored him, but I was obviously creeped out. I told my friend. At first my friend said that she doesn't know anyone with that name, but his last name made him recognize him as the son of a family friend. They never talked. His family didn't know that he was working as a delivery guy, and he was laid off because he became obsessed with his boss, which was older than his mom. I also lost my keys, so I asked my landlord for a replacement. I didn't think much of it until I got home to my door being open. Obviously, I was cautious, but there's no one in my apartment, so I sighed in relief, thinking maybe I left it open. I work night shift, so sometimes my mind is all over the place. Now that I'm thinking about it, I overlooked a lot of things, and I'm thinking about installing CCTV in the front of my apartment. I am scared though, because he knows my address. Update. My friend told me to report him to the police, but I'm too scared because they might just let him go and then he'll take revenge on me. She also told me that he might be doing drugs, as told by his family, since he's acting suspicious. The most I can do right now is change my locks and install CCTV in front. Wish me luck, guys. Another update. Thank you. I'm overwhelmed by you guys worrying about me. So far, I haven't encountered him anymore, though I don't really go out that much. I sent my delivery name to my boyfriend's, maybe because his family knew and talked to him. I haven't caught anything strange around my house either. I think I'm in the safe zone now. I'm gonna move to a different city in a few months, probably with my dog. My boyfriend is another problem since he can't move because his parents won't let him. If only he was as worried about me as you guys are. Maybe I'll just get another boyfriend. To give context, I used to be a 911 dispatcher for a small city. We dispatched all law, fire, EMS for the entire county, and within this county were multiple law agencies. I had been there for about 3 months or so when I met him. Let's call him Jake. Jake had recently transferred from a big department in California and landed himself randomly at our department. It didn't make much sense as to why he left California in the first place, but he always insisted that it was just time for him to move on to a smaller and less dangerous department. Him and I quickly became close and would chat almost every day after I got off shift. Within a few months, it became apparent that we both liked each other, and our flirting progressed into something more serious. Fast forward a few months later. It turns out that he was doing some inappropriate things to photos and videos of me while he was actively on duty. This and a few other things he had kept hidden on duty led to him losing his license and leaving. During the process of his termination, his sergeant had suggested I get a protective order against him, as he made threatening comments previously towards me, such as, "You better be telling the truth. I'll find out Tuesday if you're lying to me," etc. I had begun to fill out the paperwork and was told I had a temporary protective order on him in the meantime. But don't think I ever did. About 2 weeks after his termination, he calls me to catch up. The entire call is like an old friend to an old friend. What are you doing for work? Do you have a boyfriend now? But progressively turns more personal. When does your shift end? What do you drive? Being 18 and naive, I treated him like I always had, answering his questions. I contacted his old department afterwards, as the sergeant told me to let him know if I was ever contacted again. But they turned me away pretty quickly and didn't want anything to do with it. With that, I blocked Jake. Roughly a month later, I get a call from a new number, and it's Jake. Once again, he wants to meet up and catch up. But this time, he so casually goes on about this new house he wanted to buy in my neighborhood, knowing it's my neighborhood. I never told him where I lived in town, let alone what specific neighborhood. During this call, he progressively got more aggressive as well, making statements such as, "If I knew I was getting it canned, I should have just had my way with you." He half-heartedly joked about getting a hotel room just for me, and that was that. A few days later, he FaceTimed me, and once again came off simply as wanting to catch up, as he was sick. Midway through our seemingly normal conversation, he makes it apparent that he's touching himself the entire time. Keep in mind, nothing suggestive was mentioned, and our conversation at this point was about his new dog. I blocked him once again, but he tried to follow my social media, and now I've started to see him in my area. Last I knew, he lived about 30 to 45 minutes in the opposite direction from me. Am I reading too much into this, or should I generally consider this stalking? I'm a female, 20. When I was younger, maybe 13 or 14, I was walking to town with my mother. I lived in a smallish town in England. It was a quick walk, 15 minutes, but about 5 minutes after leaving the house, I had one of the most unsettling encounters ever. Whilst walking, there was this man approaching us. Nothing weird at this point. I thought he had walked past us like everyone else. However, this random man leaned in towards me as he was walking past and whispered something to me. I remember it being creepy, somewhere along the lines of him knowing where I lived. It was subtle and happened quickly. I was shocked, especially since my mom was right next to me. Bold move from a creepy guy. I recall the man being possibly in his late 20s, kinda scruffy looking, a little chubby, with longish brown hair and a beard, but I knew I had never seen him before this point. I waited a few seconds for us to distance ourselves from the stranger, then turned to my mom, completely freaked out, and quietly asked if she had heard what the guy said to me. She said she didn't. I thought maybe I misinterpreted the situation or misheard him. We kind of brushed it off and continued our day. I felt uneasy but tried not to think about it. The rest of the day was fairly normal until the morning after, when my dad was talking to our neighbor. The neighbor told my dad during the early hours of the morning there was a man lurking right outside our houses for some time, hovering around my dad's and neighbor's car. Now this is really weird because we live in a kind of closed off area. The only people we see outside our homes are neighbors, but even they wouldn't come right up to our doors, especially not at like 2 or 3 in the morning. Even delivery drivers can't find our house most of the time because we're hidden away. This has never happened before and never happened again after this, at least to our knowledge. Of course, you can imagine how absolutely terrified I was to hear this. I explained to my dad what had happened the day before and reminded my mom, kind of a "I told you so" moment. I felt so scared to be in my own home. I remember calling a friend talking about the situation. We researched about what we could do, but there wasn't really any action we could take. Just had to be observant and cautious, I guess. I can't remember much about what happened after that, but I never saw that man again. The whole situation creeps me out, and it doesn't make sense. The man outside my house wasn't confirmed to be the same man that walked past us earlier, as it was too dark to make out any discernible features, but it sure is an amazing coincidence if so. Never knew where to talk about this experience, but I figured it belongs here. I'd love to hear your opinions and theories. When I was 18 and newly graduated, I ran into some issues with my attempts to enroll in college and also had a hard time finding a job in my area in the meantime, which led me to having to sign on at a job center. They determined that I was too shy to succeed in interviews and placed me in a group that was supposed to teach me interview skills. In order to fix that, the group ended up ultimately being a complete waste of time. I honestly think they just put me in the wrong group, or just needed an extra member, and made an excuse to throw me in there to make the numbers. But that's not really relevant to my story. And the other group members didn't do much to help my shyness, since they were all men who were at least 4 decades older than me, and obviously didn't share any of my interests. Unfortunately, I ended up gaining the attention of one of the members I wanted nothing to do with. I don't actually remember the man's name at this point, but I think it's something generic like John, so that's what I'll call him. John immediately got off on the wrong foot with the rest of the group when he interrupted the instructor during our introduction to the course to complain that him being there was useless, since he will be retiring in a few years anyways, and no one would want to hire someone who spent over 10 years in prison. When that didn't get him the reaction he wanted, I assumed the rest of the group thought he was just attention seeking, and the instructor had heard similar things before from people who weren't happy about being in that course. He waited until we had been given paperwork to complete, and then turned to the man next to him and loudly explained that the prison sentence was for beating his ex-wife, but that she was a lying bitch and he never put his hand on her, that she didn't even have any bruises on her at the trial, or evidence of bruises, or other injuries before that either. But because she was a woman, the judge automatically believed her and sent him to jail. This immediately set me on edge. I'm not an expert when it comes to the law, but I do watch a lot of true crime channels on YouTube, and I never heard of a sentence for over 10 years for a single beating that supposedly never happened and didn't leave visible injuries. Either John was lying and had severely beat his wife to the point of putting her in the hospital, or he was arrested for other charges and was covering up what he actually went to prison for. I immediately decided I wanted nothing to do with him, regardless of which one it was, and would avoid interacting with him as much as possible outside of polite hellos and passing him things if asked. Like I said before, I didn't really interact much with the other members of the group because of their ages. I attended the first half of the meeting in the morning, spent the dinner break in the library while the men snuck off to a pub, and then went home immediately after the second half was over. No one ever asked me how I spent my breaks, and since the pub and library were in the opposite directions from each other and couldn't be seen from the front of the building that the group met in because of the way the streets were arranged, there should be no way for any of them knowing where I had been, which made what happened next even more worrying. About halfway through the course, there was a day where I had bumped into a friend on my dinner break and decided to put off visiting the library until the course was over for the day and catch up with them instead. I spent at least a quarter of an hour there before heading to a desk to check out my books, and ended up being drawn into a conversation by the librarian who had noticed I was checking out books related to a franchise he also enjoyed, and that was getting a new movie the next year. There were only a handful of other people in the library, so I didn't see anything wrong with talking to a friendly man around my age who shared my interests after 8 hours of boredom and paperwork. We had been talking for 15 minutes when he suddenly glanced over my shoulder, looking confused and concerned, and was just opening his mouth to say something when someone grabbed me by my shoulders. My friends and family know that I hate having my shoulders touched without warning and would have never done that to me, so I immediately knew that whoever was touching me was a stranger and knocked their hand away while turning around and backing up into the librarian's desk. It was John. He was standing directly behind me with a huge smile on his face, and as soon as I turned around, He made a joke about knowing that he would find me there, and how I practically lived there, before chattering at me as if we were close friends. I was just completely confused. It was obvious that he hadn't just coincidentally bumped into me from the way that he was talking. But John had been kept behind while the group was heading out because he had filled out his paperwork incorrectly. And as I mentioned before, you can't see the library from the building, so he shouldn't have had any way of seeing where I had gone. It had almost been a half an hour since I left the building, so if he had left not long after me and had just seen me go in while walking in the same direction, he would have came inside by then. The only way it made sense for him to know where to look for me and joke that I practically lived in there would be that he somehow learned I was going to the library during dinner breaks, known that I hadn't gone that day, and guessed that I would go after the meeting instead. What made that even stranger than it already was is the fact that John never showed any interest in me during the group sessions, and mostly ignored me the way I ignored him, unless we were forced to interact for whatever reason. So why was he following me into another building to start a conversation out of nowhere, and acting like we were close? While John was still talking, the librarian leaned in to ask me if I knew the man, because he obviously saw my negative reaction by being touched by John. And when I briefly explained the situation to him, he asked John politely to please leave me alone or leave the building. John refused and tried to tell the man that we were friends, completely ignoring the fact that I just said we weren't, and how ridiculous it would be to claim that an 18-year-old girl and a 50 to 60-year-old man were friends in the first place. When the librarian asked again, and I outright told him that harassing other customers wasn't acceptable, and he would be removed from the building if he refused to leave me alone. John smiled and agreed to leave in the tone you use when humoring a child, before walking out and very obviously stationed himself right outside the doors, waiting for me to leave too. The librarian was clearly concerned and asked for the full story of what was going on, and I told him, including my suspicions that John had been following me around without my knowledge, to know that I would be there in the first place. He suggested I stay in the library until his break so he could walk me to the bus stop to make sure John left me alone. But it wouldn't be for several hours, and if I had waited, I wouldn't have gotten home in time to change and head to another meeting I had later in that evening. So he asked me to at least come in the next time I was there, to let him know I was safe, and he reluctantly watched me leave. John immediately stepped into my personal space when I got outside, jokingly asking me what the librarian's problem was, and still acting like we were friends. I tried to walk around him without answering him and head to the bus station to go home, but he grabbed me by my arm and reminded me that there was a closer stop for our bus. When I told him that we aren't going on the same bus because I'd never seen him on the same one as me, he corrected me and said that we both need number 3 and told me where he lived, which was in fact on the same bus route as me. Although I was still tempted to walk away and go to the station instead, and possibly sneakily get on a different bus and just walk the rest of the way home, it was very clear to me that he was going to follow me if I did, because he still had a hold of my arm, refusing to let go when I tried to pull away. And there were several dark alleys on the way that I had no intention of going anywhere near while in his company. When I agreed to go to the closer stop, he let go of me and started walking at my side, chattering like we were good friends again. John kept walking when we reached the stop, which was odd, but I was hoping that the lack of response to anything he said made him give up and decide to leave me alone, or that he had mixed up that stop with one further along and I could run while his back was turned. No luck. As soon as he realized I wasn't following him anymore, John came back, frowning as if he was confused and asking me, "I thought we were going to go get coffee together." Shocked, I told him blatantly no. He kept pushing, trying to convince me that I had agreed to go with him, and when that didn't work, he switched tactics and claimed I had mentioned while leaving the classroom that I wanted some coffee, so he thought we could go together. That was an obvious lie too, since I don't drink coffee, and I told him so. John's only answer was to say I didn't have to get coffee and kept pushing me to go to the cafe with him. I firmly told him no and apparently he took that as me not wanting to drink in public because he attempted to invite me to his flat. If that wasn't weird enough, he started telling me that if there was a naked girl on the couch when we got there, I'm not to worry because that's his 18-year-old daughter. Yeah, because an 18-year-old girl is definitely going to lounge around naked on her father's furniture in front of him, right? Other people at the stop were staring at us now, and I took the opportunity to point out that I was also 18 and firmly tell John that I don't want to go with him to his flat and to leave me alone. He completely ignored that last part and tried to claim that I was lying about my age and that I was at least 29, when most people at that time still mistook me for being in my early teens at first glance. The bus arrived at that moment and I got on as quickly as possible, thinking that I would be safe there and the driver would throw him off if need be. No. When I sat down in the aisle seat to stop John from sitting next to me, he physically shoved me across the seat, pinning me against the window to the point I could barely move, and pressing his knees up against the seat in front of him to make sure I had no room to get past him unless he allowed it. The only way for me to get out would have involved me straddling his lap, since the seat in front of us were occupied. I loudly told him to move and leave me alone, but he ignored me. He continued trying to convince me to come back to his flat. Although people gave me uncomfortable looks, when I tried to make eye contact with some of the men in hopes that they would help, they would look away as if they hadn't noticed or suddenly become very interested in their phones. I spent the ride huddled up against the window trying to touch him as little as possible, and was ignored again when I shouted for him to stop touching me, because he kept putting his hands on my thigh as high up as he could without directly groping me. No one did anything about it, but he stopped touching me after that. He had apparently also given up on convincing me to go back to his flat that day. But when we were coming up to my apartment block, he pointed it out to me, physically turning my face when I refused to look, told me his apartment number and tried to give me a kiss goodbye on the cheek, which I dodged, before getting off the bus and knocking on the opposite window to try to get my attention so he could wave at me. When the bus set off again, several people started loudly talking about how disgusting he was, and that men like him should be reported, while refusing to look in my direction where I sat shaking and seething in my seat. And other than the awkward, "So, are you alright?" from the bus driver, just as I was about to step off the bus, no one bothered to check on me. As soon as I got home, I sent an email to the instructor, telling her I wanted to switch groups and never see that man, explaining what he had done. She read it but ignored it for an entire week until I sent a follow-up, threatening to get police involved if they forced me to interact with that man again. Their solution was to tell me that I could leave the course early instead, essentially kicking me out as if I was the problem. I bumped into that man not long afterwards, and he tried to ask me why I hadn't been attending that group anymore, admitting that he asked the instructor but they had refused to tell him. But I managed to get away and lose him in the crowd. I've seen him a few more times passing in the years since, but fortunately he has never noticed me or approached me again, and I hope it stays that way. As I was walking home from work last night, about halfway to my house, a disheveled man who looked like he was either homeless or extremely down on his luck crossed paths with me from the other side of the sidewalk. He had initially been walking in the opposite direction, but as soon as he saw me, he immediately turned around and started following me. He began rambling incoherently and aggressively, and his words were so slurred that I hardly understood a thing he said. All I could make out was something about a care package and "look at you." It was obvious that the man was under the influence of multiple substances. I quickened my pace and tried to avoid eye contact with this man, and he was getting agitated that I wasn't paying attention to him. When my walking speed got too quick for his inebriated stumbling to keep up with, he stopped talking and instead just began trying to follow me. I kept looking over my shoulder at him, and every time I saw him, he would either stop or try to duck behind a bush. Finally, I started outright sprinting and looking for a spot that I could hide myself. I came up to my local mosque and tried to sneak around the corner into the parking lot where there was a tree that I hid behind. While hiding there, I frantically dialed 911. I told them that a strange man was displaying unstable behavior and was trying to follow me, and described my location, myself, and then the man to them. The dispatcher assured me that officers were on the way, but while I was waiting for them, I saw a figure heading up the sidewalk in front of the parking lot I was hiding in. Panic immediately filled me until the passerby was close enough where I could see that it wasn't the same man who had just bothered me, and they turned out to be harmless. Mere moments after this, the cops arrived to where I was, pulled up next to the tree, and motioned for me to come over and talk to them. The officer driving the vehicle asked me standard questions, a description of the incident, where I was when it happened, etc. While we were talking, he spotted a man in another parking lot down the street, not too far from where I first encountered the creep. He asked me if that was a man I had encountered, and it was hard to tell between the darkness and the distance, but I was pretty sure it was, and it appeared that an officer got out to talk to the man. The officer I had been talking to asked me how far from my house I was, and I told him that I was pretty close to my street at this point. He assured me that it should be safe to walk the rest of the way home, and that they had other cop cars patrolling the area. I thanked him and finished walking home without further incident, thank God. Shortly after I got home, I saw that I got a text from my boyfriend that read, "Are you okay?" The text had been sent around the same time the incident was occurring, as if he could sense that I was in a fearful situation. I replied back to him, telling him what happened. He told me that he had gotten yelled at by a homeless man earlier too. I described the creep I encountered to him, and asked him if he thought it was the same guy. He said he didn't think so. We also had a brief phone call to make sure each other was okay. I let him know that I was home safe, and he told me that he was in a vehicle with a group, so he was safe too. I don't know what the cops ended up doing about the man, but I hope he stays as far away from me as possible. I'm a 31-year-old female. When I was 16, I was in choir at my high school that had performed for a lot of different events around town. One of them was to sing at the middle school sporting events. The middle school in my hometown is just about a half-mile away from my childhood home, so whenever we had events there, I walked. This one I think it was in November. We had to sing at a basketball game, and it was obviously dark when I was able to leave. Normally, I wasn't allowed to walk home at night, but for choir, I was given permission unless I felt unsafe. But there wasn't any reason for me to be creeped out at first, so I started my walk. Just down from the middle school is a stretch of road with almost no streetlights that has always creeped me out when walking. I crossed quickly and had a fast pace going, as I am a naturally paranoid human. About 2 minutes into the dark zone, I heard rapid footsteps behind me. I at first figured it was a jogger, but they made no attempt to pass me, and just stayed a comfortable 10-foot distance. They began whistling a jaunty tune, which at first I thought was fun. At this point, I wasn't super scared, perhaps because of the happy whistling tune, but I noticed the footsteps began to speed up. There were no cars on the road, and given the lack of light, when I turned around, all I could see was a silhouette shrouded in darkness. At that realization, I quickened my pace to barely under a run. The whistling continued, getting more breathless as this person began to run after me. I looked back and saw a dark figure coming at me full speed, and in terror, began running frantically as well. I will never forget those last moments running through my dark subdivision, hearing his whistling and footsteps getting closer and closer. This person followed me to my door. I ran inside and locked the front, checked all the doors, and went upstairs to my bedroom. From the window, I could still see his silhouette and could hear him whistling. I slept with a knife that night.